Scenario 1, your child reluctantly gives you his report card, the dreaded report card for some children. So phys ed, got an A, Chumash A, Hasidus C+, Hebrew A minus, Yiddish C+, davening A and benching A. What do you do?
Just be positive about what you see.
Okay, so we have a gentleman here who says, be positive for what you see. Be careful with that. Be careful with that. And I'm going to share with you why. Because the child is going to say, you're trying to pump me up.
If your child knows that you always be very positive and always, when it came from your heart, you will not do it. Guarantee.
I'm just letting you know, be careful. Because what happens with that is that a child that knows that those C pluses mean a lot to you, and he didn't do well. And he knows that there's a lot of room for improvement. And somehow you need to figure out how to give him the space so that he starts taking responsibility over his own report card without pumping him up. Because it's not, your job is not to make them feel, oh, I'm so great about myself. No. Your job is to help them be more self-aware. So paradigm shift. Very different what I'm saying. It's very different. Because here, in this instance, there's obviously an issue. So this is a way to deal with this. Remember, keeping in mind, do let your child make amends and do provide a logical consequence. And keep in mind the previous techniques of before. So you look at the report card, and you look at your child. What do you think, Mendy? Notice, you're putting the monkey on Mendy. You're allowing Mendy now to start thinking about his report card. So Mendy's going to say, well, it's like this. You know, my teacher for Yiddish and Hasidus hates me. He just despises me. I look this way, he says something. I look that way, he says something. I just can't stand him. And because he can't stand me, I can't stand him. And that's why I got a C+. So, Mendy, you're telling me you have an issue with your Yiddish and Hasidus teacher? That's right, Ty. That's not just me. The whole class hates him. He's the worst teacher ever. Now, you can only get information, may not necessarily be true information, but at least the child is talking about it. That's step one. The child needs to start explaining what's going on in their own words, because you need information. This doesn't tell you much. And if your child clams up, you won't get much information, and you won't know what next steps need to be taken. This is hard to do, but remember, you're not their cheerleader in this sense. And that doesn't mean you're not a cheerleader for your children. But when you need information of this report card, because this report card is a certain bit of information, it doesn't give you much. You need your child to elaborate, and you need your child to take ownership. You need your child to take responsibility. That can only start by asking them what's going on. Let the child start talking about next steps. So you're saying that you have a real issue with your Yiddish and Hasidus teacher. Do you think this is how we should continue all year? Or do you think you need my help? Or what can you do? Oh, I don't know, Ta. Maybe you can speak with the principal. Or it could be, I don't know, Todd, did you ever have a teacher like that that you hated? What did you do, Todd? Have dialogue with them. Because all of us had a teacher that didn't like us at one point in our lives. Or at least we thought they didn't like us. Scenario 2. I know.
About this, if we need to talk with paper and pen to write all what we say. And
Not yet. Not yet. Unless it's been a series of report cards that are like this, meaning that you're noticing a trend. Okay? If it's only one report card like this, and your child hasn't had this before, then you need to you need to give room for the child to speak. This is very similar to the scenario with the little girl screaming. You need to give them space to talk. You let your child know repeatedly that he can't play with a baseball in the house. He went ahead and played and broke your window. It's winter time. You've now got a broken window. It's 9:20. Okay. Again, very similar situation with the vase. It's asking the child, how are you going to make amends? There are philosophical underpinnings around these 3 techniques that I shared with you. If you want your child to be empathetic, you must be an empathetic listener. That's the essence of being able. An able person really listens to others. A person who's not able is not listening to anyone. They've already made up their minds. And they don't really care what you've got to say. If you want them, you need to start walking in this way. You need to listen. If you want your child to be confident, gain their cooperation without destroying their self-esteem. Whether it's sarcasm, calling them names, hitting them, it destroys their self-esteem, their confidence. If you want your child to think logically, then make sure that you are logical in your consequences. Otherwise, there's no if-then. It's chaos. It doesn't make sense. Now I gave you a ton and I'm a little over time, and that only leaves us about 30 minutes for Q&A. And notice that there have been a lot of questions. This is why I usually like to reserve a lot of time for questions and answers. And I've asked that folk write down their questions, so this way it can be it doesn't have to be an emotional question, but it can be a to-the-point question, because notice there's seating for 100, but I see at least another 50 people standing. Now, what I want to make sure that I talk about before we do Q&A is these techniques, and I've only given you about 10% of the techniques that we do with the parenting workshops. I've done this for the Glen very successfully, in my opinion. Of course, it's in my opinion, but they've been raving. The parents were so grateful, they went with me to the Ohel. So that just goes to show you how grateful they felt over the parenting workshops. I had a dozen Glen go with me because they felt very happy. And when Israel and Yaakov came, they said, you have to do this for the Jewish community. So what we did is we designed this plenary session so you would get a taste. But a lot of these techniques are hard to implement, and there's so much to learn, and it's really, it takes time to nurture new habits. because we are so ingrained in doing certain